Alien phenomena is quite an elusive topic. Despite many years of documented encounters, there's still no confirmation from any official authorities, be it mainstream science or government, that there may be something otherworldly going on. On the contrary, there's often ridicule and avoidance whenever the subject comes up. Yet most of the general public believes that extraterrestrial UFOs exist and that the government is hiding information from us. Many people have had encounters of sightings themselves. However, most people don't give it much attention or thought, believing that it doesn't really affect us anyway and that we'll deal with it once official contact has been made. But what if the alien civilization is influencing mankind and the world at large for thousands of years? What would be the implications? Our views on life and existence, science and religion, spirituality and evolution, consciousness and psychology, as well as reality as we know it, would take on a whole new understanding when looking deeper into the UFO phenomena and the possibility of a higher alien intelligence affecting our world. Perhaps we're not the main show here on Earth, and maybe not even the top of the food chain. It seems like the people of Earth have been waiting for an alien civilization to make themselves known for decades. What they may not know is that they've already shown up unexpectedly close to us. However, the powers that be decided we were not psychologically ready for it. These extraterrestrial beings were detected close to our home, on the moon. However, this discovery was immediately classified as secret. Here's an extract from the official press release. NASA scientists and engineers participating in exploration of Mars and the Moon reported the results of their discoveries at a briefing at the Washington National Press Club on March 21, 1996. It was announced for the first time that man-made structures and objects have been discovered on the Moon. The scientists spoke rather cautiously and evasively about these objects. They mentioned that the man-made objects are possible and stated the information was still under study and official results will be published later. It was mentioned at the briefing as well that Russia has photos proving the presence of such activity on the moon.
What the new policy directive does is it places a greater emphasis on the moon as the next step beyond low Earth orbit.
I think it's time for us to move out and get flying again. Engage our partners, engage our international partners, and look at the ways that we can do things differently and still get these missions done. We've got a lot of people that want to help us here.
45 years ago, 1972, the last time an astronaut walked on the moon. On Monday, that retired astronaut, Harrison Schmitt, gave President Donald Trump a memento after he signed a directive ordering the U.S. to send explorers back to the moon.
We'll learn. The directive I'm signing today will refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery. It marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use. This time, we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars.
And the moon is the next feasible step. Mars remains an inspiring horizon goal that we need to be working toward, but we first need to walk out of the neighborhood before we can run.
The United States has shunned the Paris Climate Agreement, but it has big plans beyond planet Earth.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
President Trump wants to send American astronauts back to the moon and to places no man has ever gone before. Trump's first space policy directive orders NASA to refocus on human exploration and discovery, 45 years after its last Apollo mission to the moon.
And although it wasn't identified what kind of activity it was, thousands of photos and video materials from the Apollos and the Clementine space station showed many parts of the lunar surface where this activity were easily identifiable. The video films and photos made by U.S. astronauts during the Apollo program were demonstrated at this briefing. Some scientists were puzzled as to why these extraordinary findings had not been presented to the public. NASA specialists answered. It was difficult to forecast the reaction of public to information that some creatures had been or still are on the moon. In addition, there were other reasons which were beyond the control of NASA. Specialist in lunar studies Richard Hoagland says that NASA is still altering photo materials before they're published in public catalogs and files. They do some retouching or are partially refocusing them while copying. Some investigators, Hoagland is among them, suppose that an extraterrestrial race has used the moon as a terminal station during their activity on the Earth. These suggestions are confirmed by the legends and myths of different nations of our planet. The ruins of lunar cities stretch for many kilometers. Huge domes on massive basements, numerous tunnels, and other constructions cause scientists to reconsider their opinions concerning the moon. How the moon appeared and principles of its revolving around the Earth still pose a great problem for scientists. Some partially destroyed objects on the lunar surface do not resemble natural geological formations. They are complex geometrical structure that do not seem to have been formed naturally. They look artificial. In the upper part of Rima Hadley, not far from the place where Apollo 15 had landed, a construction surrounded by a tall D-shaped wall was discovered. As of now, different artifacts have been discovered in 44 regions. The NASA Goddard Space Flight Center and the Houston Planetary Institute have investigated these regions, but the findings were not made public. Mysterious terrace-shaped excavations of rock have been discovered near the Tycho crater. The concentric hexahedral excavations and the tunnel entry on the terrace side can't be the results of natural geological processes. Instead, they look very much like open cast mines. A transparent dome raised above the crater edge was discovered near the crater Copernicus. The dome is unusual as it glows white and blue from the inside. A rather strange object, which is unusual even for the moon, was discovered in the upper part of the factory area. A disk of about 50 meters in diameter stands on a square basement surrounded with walls. In this picture, close to the room, we can see a dark, round opening on the ground, which resembles an entry to an underground caponnier. There is a rectangular area between factory and the crater Copernicus, which is 300 meters wide, 400 meters long. Apollo 10 astronauts took a photo of a 1-mile-long object called Castle, which is at the height of 14 kilometers and casts a distinct shadow on the lunar surface. The object seems to consist of several cylindrical units and a large conjunctive unit. The internal porous structure of the castle is clearly seen in one of the pictures, which gives the impression that some parts of the object are transparent. When Richard Hoagland requested originals of the castle pictures for the second time, no pictures were found at all. They disappeared, even from the list of pictures made by the Apollo 10 crew. Only immediate pictures of the object were found in the archives, which unfortunately don't depict the internal structure of the object. When the Apollo 12 crew landed on the lunar surface, they saw that the landing was observed by a half-transparent pyramidal object. It was hovering just several meters above the lunar surface and shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow against the black sky. In 1969, when the film about astronauts traveling to the Sea of Storms was shown, the astronauts saw the strange objects once again, which were later called striped glasses. NASA was finally beginning to understand that there was something else on the moon. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, rather strangely, was quoted as saying, "My neck still aches as I had to constantly turn my head around because we felt we were not alone there. We had no choice but to pray." Ken Johnston, who worked at the Houston Space Center and studied photos and video taken during the Apollo program, discussed photos which seemed to show artifacts with Richard Hoagland, and said that the NASA leadership was starting to panic because they had discovered a great number of anomalous objects on the moon. It was even said that the piloted flights to the moon were going to be halted. Many investigators are especially interested in the ancient structures resembling partially destroyed cities. Photos reveal an astonishingly regular geometry of square and rectangular constructions. They resemble our cities seen from the height of 5 to 8 kilometers. A mission control specialist commented on the picture. "Our guys observed ruins of the lunar cities, transparent pyramids, domes, and God knows what else, which are currently hidden deep inside the NASA safes. He recalled how one astronaut had commented that he felt like Robinson Crusoe when he suddenly came across prints of bare feet on the surface of the moon. What do geologists and scientists say after studying the pictures of lunar cities and other anomalous objects? They say that such objects can't be natural formations. One stated, "We should admit they're artificial, especially the domes and pyramids." There have been many books written on this subject. Let's look at the theories put forth way back in 1976 in the book Somebody Else is on the Moon by George H. Leonard. His conclusions were fantastic, even outrageous at the time, but all referenced point by point with quotes from NASA personnel and various experts in geology, astronomy, and other scientific fields. He had a group of experts working with him on the visual analysis of lunar photographs. The book is full of sketches detailing the things he found. Leonard started with the basic mysteries of the moon, like where did it come from? Is it too large relative to the mass of the Earth to have been gravitationally captured? If it was moving fast enough to be simply deflected, it would have had to make not just one but several wide orbital passes, each and every one at precisely the right angle, before it could have settled into a stable orbit. The sequence of events seems quite improbable, yet according to scientists, it may be the least impossible option we have right now, although there are many other theories. That the Earth is the only place in the solar system where one can see a total eclipse is also quite odd. The apparent diameter of the moon seen from the surface of the Earth is exactly the same as the apparent diameter of the sun. That seems like one hell of a coincidence, especially considering how difficult it is to explain how the moon managed to establish a stable orbit. The bottom line scientific argument is that it did, so therefore it must have been possible. Now then, if the moon was parked there, one more oddity is also solved. Luna is said to be tidal locked, gravitationally held with one side always facing the Earth, a consequence of having two large bodies in proximity. This implies that the moon was initially spinning but slowed down over time due to the gravitational drag. Given even more time, the mass of the moon slowly migrated earthward, resulting in a pear shape with the narrow end pointed outward. Somehow this was accomplished without pulling the whole body crashing down from orbit. Some suggest the moon was molten and formed the pear shape as it cooled. Well, if you spin clay on a potter's wheel, you get a round pot. If that molten mass was not spinning, why would it form a planetoid anyway? It would have had to have been rolling, turning perpendicular to the Earth's axis to allow the migration of material that we see. If, however, it was placed there deliberately, with one side intentionally oriented earthward, like most of our artificial satellites, then the tidal bulge is more reasonably explained. It would most likely be a feature of the original design. That would be a logical way to ensure that one side would in fact remain pointed at Earth. Let's return to Leonard. George Leonard studied thousands of the photos in the NASA Moon Archives, noting artificial constructions and machinery all over the place. He talked to amateur astronomers and NASA personnel and said he was generally well received. The only real exception to this he cites is an occasional encounter with the bureaucratic labyrinth when seeking some particular photo. He would be told it was not at that location, in some other file, labeled with a different stock number by some other agency, and some of his requests were not processed at all. This might have simply been normal government behavior. Certainly he was not greeted with a big smile and a hearty, "Come, let us show you what we're hiding." It seemed clear to him that the photo evidence of intelligent activity on the moon was a subject that NASA did not wish to address. In fact, NASA is and always has been loath to discuss such possibilities, never mind what appears on the photos, never mind the anomalies astronomers, amateur and professional, have thought they spotted for hundreds of years. While peculiar occurrences and odd formations are certainly good fodder for scholarly papers and grant requests, any suggestion of artificially or intelligent design is usually met with ridicule. The main tool used for the lunar cover-up has always been disdain. You don't see that because it isn't there. Leonard made sketches out of the things he found and tended to settle on an observational theory of somebody carrying out mining operations. He drew spidery machines that would be as large as small cities, noting the tracks they left on the crater floor as they chewed away at the rim. He states in the preface to this book that, "No, I don't know who they are. No, I don't know where they come from. No, I don't know precisely what their purpose is." But he did favor the idea of aliens being responsible, probably more than one type of alien rather than people from here. He did not completely rule out the possibility of a clandestine terrestrial space program, but he felt that since this could not explain the long history of observed moon anomalies, it was less likely to be a factor. There's a lot that one could read between the lines of his one and only book if one was so inclined. He's one of those authors who occasionally seems to be trying to very subtly imply an additional vector or layer. This could have been his way of holding back from making an overly tight fit of the data into his theories, which he repeatedly cautions are incomplete. Or it could have meant something else. Perhaps there was more to George H. Leonard than at first apparent. There's a reason why professional astronomers, almost all of whom are tied in one way or another to government funding, shy away from pointing their big telescopes at the moon. They affect a blasé attitude of indifference towards our nearest neighbor, because if they do look, they see unusual things. Leonard makes note of this, and the situation has not changed in the years since. Most lunar observation that we know of is done by amateurs. There have been plenty of probes launched at the moon, but except for the Lick Observatory photo taken in the 1950s, there's been relatively little ground-based investigation by major observatories, especially in the US. Leonard believed that the Apollo missions landed on the moon, though he was careful to steer clear of theories that went beyond the data he'd accumulated. He did, however, speculate. As Richard Hoagland commented, a necessary part of science is speculation. No guts, no glory. Leonard speaks of many conversations with insiders, people who knew what the secrets were. Apparently much of the feedback he received in those chats was of the "you're on the right track" or "look at such and such" variety. This frustrated him greatly. No one wanted to really spill the beans, it seemed. They wanted him to do it, but wouldn't tell him what there was that needed spilling. The other possibility, which he doesn't state directly, but which had obviously occurred to him, was that they didn't actually have any confidence that they really knew the answers. There were aliens involved, there were politics involved, there was spinning going on. Basic life advice includes, don't spill while you're spinning, it can be very messy. While doing his research, Leonard found an unusual quote chosen by NASA, this one leading into the preliminary science report published by the Apollo 17 mission. There's nothing more difficult to take in hand, or perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success, than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Even before we tell you the name of the author, you may have already been slightly startled by the last four words. But that is, of course, just the coincidence of contemporary context, right? The author lived some time ago in 16th century Italy. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. Let's now take a look at what is actually going on up there on that most ancient of artificial satellites. For hundreds of years, observers including Plato, Aristophanes, and Aristarchus have reported the appearance of mysterious lunar transient phenomena. In the early 19th century, Sir John Herschel in England saw unidentified lights on the moon during an eclipse.
There you go. Hey, what are those lights on the dark side of the moon? Where they go? You see that? I'm going down. Just a bit down there. You see something twinkling right there? Stars. What is that?
And noted that some of the lights appeared to be moving above the moon. Other astronomers of the period reported seeing geometrical patterns of lights that resembled city streets. On July 29, 1953, John O'Neill observed a 19-kilometer-long bridge straddling the crater Mare Crisium. Following the report of his discovery to the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, he was subjected to verbal attack from a number of astronomers. However, just 1 month later, famous British astronomer Dr. H. Wilkins verified his sighting. Since that time, other equally strange objects have been photographed on the lunar surface. The Shard, an obelisk-shaped object discovered in 1968, towers nearly 2.5 kilometers above the Euclid area of the moon's surface. And another feature, the tower, is an amazing spire that rises more than 8 kilometers from the Sinus Medi region. Dr. Bruce Cornett, a geologist and paleontologist who submitted these photographs to laboratory study, commented, "No known natural process can explain such structures." As far as the Apollo missions are concerned, rumors have circulated for years about what the astronauts are reported to have witnessed on the lunar surface. In Above Top Secret, the worldwide UFO cover-up, Timothy Good stated that former NASA Chief of Communication Systems Maurice Shadlin claimed that astronaut Neil Armstrong viewed 2 UFOs resting on the rim of a crater. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, but nobody has talked about it until now. Soviet scientist Dr. Vladimir Azaja, a physics and mathematics professor, has stated, Neil Armstrong relayed the message to Mission Control that 2 large, mysterious objects were watching them after having landed near the moon module, but this message was censored by NASA. In general, the astronauts, nearly all military officers controlled by security regulations, have maintained a united front. However, there have been exceptions. Dr. Edgar Mitchell on the Oprah Winfrey Show of July 19, 1992, suggested that all information regarding UFOs had not been released, adding, "I do believe that there's a lot more known about extraterrestrial investigation than is available to the public right now, and has been for a long time. It's a long story. It goes back to World War II when all of that happened and is highly classified stuff." Colonel Gordon Cooper, in a letter to a meeting of the United Nations in 1978 to discuss UFOs, stated, "I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets, which are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth." Any interested person looking back at the objectives stated by NASA at the beginning of the Apollo lunar program would have to wonder what went wrong. Why did these missions come to a complete halt after Apollo 17? Many members of the public and most scientists queried the end of the moon missions when more questions than answered were being generated by the flights. It's like buying a Rolls Royce and then not driving it because you want to save money on gasoline, complained Dr. Thomas Gold, professor of astronomy at Cornell University. Jim Mars in Alien Agenda writes that moon researcher George Leonard observed that prior to the lunar landings, there was much media speculation on the profitable aspects of a colony and mining operations on the moon. All such talk ended abruptly after the Apollo missions were canceled. We put enough billions into the US space program to pull all the major cities of America out of debt, and then some. And after the successful Ranger, Surveyor, Orbiter, and Apollo flights, we dropped manned lunar exploration like a hot potato, he noted. Why haven't we been back to the moon is the question many people are still asking. In an attempt to find some answers to this question, let us shift our attention to PSI research and specifically to the mental process that makes possible the perception of details from distant locations, bridging the normal constraints of time and space, namely remote viewing, RV. A book by perhaps the most highly regarded and experienced remote viewer, Ingo Swann, entitled Penetration, the Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy, provides yet another dimension of speculation to the lunar question. Were it not for Swann's long and distinguished career, as perhaps the father of RV, as a remote viewer for US military intelligence, as well as his involvement as a renowned PSI researcher, instructor, and writer, then there would be no hesitation in completely omitting his strange claims from this documentary. In 1973, Ingo Swann saw a ring of rocks circling the planet Jupiter, something that no one had even imagined at that time. As far as astronomy was concerned, Saturn was the only planet with a ring system. Astronomers had dismissed his claims as nonsense. Science later confirmed all of his findings. In 1975, 2 years after the Pioneer space probe had revealed the high level of accuracy of the information about Jupiter that Swan had previously obtained by RV, he was approached for a different mission. This led to a chain of events that can only be described as bizarre, including a long journey under strict supervision by twin guards, by car, helicopter, and elevator, wearing a hood to ensure no likelihood of place recognition, including in an underground facility. Here he met the mysterious Mr. Axelrod, who's completely familiar with Swan's work at the Stanford Research Institute and who persuaded Swan, in return for $1,000 a day, to undertake an RV mission that's so secret that it exists without any paper trail. A condition of his employment is that he agrees not to reveal any details of his assignment for at least 10 years, having been assured that after that time the mission would have disappeared. After a period of time during which Swan and Mr. Axelrod discuss the protocols of RV, the latter finally gets to the purpose of the mission. Ingo Swan's task was to remote view a specific section of the moon. Swan reflected, "I had no idea what Mr. Axelrod wanted. Maybe they, whoever they were looking for places to build moon bases. Maybe they had lost a secret spacecraft or something along those lines." At his initial RV session, Swan realizes that his coordinates are for the far side of the moon. He viewed whitish sand with some sort of repeated pattern, like rows of large tractor treads on the sand, and becomes a little confused when he senses something like an atmosphere. At this point, he's given another set of coordinates and, finding himself in an entirely different site, believes that he's back on Earth. So he apologizes, has a break, and then tries again using the same coordinates as before, only to find he's seeing the same thing. Swan is quoted as saying, "I'm in a place which is sort of down like in a crater, I suppose. There's a strange green haze like a light of some kind. Beyond that, all around is dark though. I'm wondering where the light is coming from." I jolted to a stop again. After a moment, Axel prodded, "Yes, what else?" "Well, you won't like this, I guess. I see, or at least I think I see, well, some actual lights. Sort of like lights at football arenas, high up, banks of them, up on towers of some kind." Axel stared at Swan for a moment. He was not smiling. "Well, I see lights, but how can they be on the moon?" There was no answer forthcoming from Axel. Swan pressed onwards. "Have the Russians built a moon base or something? Is that what I'm supposed to remote view?" Again, no answer. "How high are the light towers?" Axel interrupted, but Swan carried on with the viewing. "Well, if I compare it to something I'm familiar with in New York, about as high as the Secretariat building at the United Nations, which has 32 floors in it." Axel narrowed his lips. "You can see that then?" Swan asked. "Am I then to assume that this stuff is on the moon? If so, this is more than a moon base, isn't it, Axel?" Again, no answer. So he continued, "But this stuff is big. Does NASA or the Soviet space program have the capabilities of getting such large stuff on the moon?" As he talked himself through all this, a certain glimmer began to dawn in the recesses of his mental darkness. Swan suddenly stopped speaking, staring incredulously at Axel. "You mean I am to assume that this stuff is not ours? Not made on Earth?" Axel raised his eyebrows, trying to grin. "Quite a surprise, isn't it?" he said. After more lunar visits, Ingo Swan finds towers, lights, machinery, and strange-looking buildings, a lot of domes of various sizes, round things like small saucers with windows. These were stored next to crater sites, sometimes in caves, sometimes in what looked like airfield hangars, long tube-like things, machinery tractor-like things that were going up and down hills, obelisks which have no apparent function. There were large platforms on domes, large cross-like structures, holes being dug into crater walls, and floors obviously having to do with some kind of mining or earth-moving operations. Finally, he sees some kind of entities or humanoids busy working in a dark lime green fog who start talking excitedly and gesticulating in his direction. He writes, "Immediately I felt like running away and hiding, which I guess I physically did since I lost sight of this particular imaging. I think they've spotted me, Axel." Axel said in a calm, low voice, so low I hardly heard it at first, "Please come away from that place." My eyes were wide as understanding drained in. "You already know they're psychic, don't you?" Axel raised his eyebrows and gave a deep sigh, and at that point he abruptly closed his folders. "I think we'd better end our work here." Another telling reason why we never went back to the moon came from a prominent professor who wished to remain anonymous. He was engaged in a discussion with Neil Armstrong during a NASA symposium. "Professor, what really happened out there with Apollo 11? Armstrong: "It was incredible. Of course, we had always known there was a possibility. The fact is, we were warned off by the aliens. There was never any question then of a space station or a moon city." "Professor, how do you mean warned off?" Armstrong: "I can't go into details except to say that their ships were far superior to ours, both in size and technology. Boy, were they big and menacing. No, there's no question of a space station." "Professor, but NASA had other missions after Apollo 11. Armstrong: "Naturally. NASA was committed at that time and couldn't risk panic on Earth, but it really was a quick scoop and back again." Armstrong confirmed that the story was true but refused to go into further detail, beyond admitting that the CIA was behind the cover-up. Why haven't we returned to the moon? Because we found a lot more there than some moon rocks. NASA discovered the existence of an alien base with buildings, towers, and other structures. Unfortunately, NASA has decided the best way to handle it is to deny their existence. They can cover up what they want. History and irrefutable evidence confirm that aliens are right now living on the dark side of the moon, keeping track of our every move.